deliver this lecture and a nice introduction of me. And I will like to start my presentation with my PPT. So please let me know if I am able to share it properly. I'm not that technical person.
No, ma'am, it's
So
opening.
I just okay. Just is it open? Yeah.
It's opening.
Okay. Can everybody see my PPT and as well as the yeah.
Ma'am, it's opening.
Thank
Just
you, Abhishekta. Thank you, webinar. This original live, like this particular series, it is really interesting. And this is in the during this kind of COVID-19 issue, we are actually losing a lot of academic activities. But these kind of webinars are helping us to join each other and discuss our researches with each other. So I am talking as Abhishekta told, like I will be talking about imprints of epidemics on human bones, a critical approach to paleopathology. So my basic training is I'm an archaeologist and got trained in working on human skeletal remains. And during that time, what I observed, I will be discussing on that. So my PowerPoint my presentation is covered in these basic topics. I will be dealing about historicity of the epidemics, or how we can trace, where we can trace this history. Then paleopathology, its methods and limitations, and a few case studies on infectious disease, and understanding socio-cultural context, because otherwise this issue cannot be completed, or the understanding the paleopathology. So when we talk about the history of pandemics, we this is a very well-known photo which was seen since we started COVID-19. So it is said that it is till March 15 how many people died by COVID-19 and how long we can stress back to the history of epidemics. So it is like plague in 165 to 180 AD. So it is toll was around 5 million people died because of that. And as you can say that epidemics is upon population, means the whatever the pathology, whatever infection diseases were there, were was on the people. So epidemics is that, and pandemic is it doesn't have any kind of restrictions about continent or any particular population, so it can spread anywhere, anytime. So this is like continuous infection virus, and we know this HIV, AIDS, then tuberculosis, smallpox. These comes under the pandemic or epidemic uh, regions, pathology. So when we talk from the archaeological point of view, this was the slab was published in 2019. This particular I will be talking later on about this, but you can see there is this particular 1 minute. So this is showing that timeline. So around 5000 BC, you are having this is hepatite B or hepatite A, and all this infection we can see in the Eurasian population from the Neolithic period. So we know during the agriculture or beginning of the agriculture, the beginning of infection disease also started. And so Abhishekta, this is something is coming annotation request. What is exactly
No,
that?
ma'am. If you
Sorry.
want, no, if you want to highlight or do something, you can use that annotation tab. It's nothing that important.
Okay, so should I decline it?
Yeah, you can.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so when we see this, we can see from around during the during the beginning of agriculture, you are getting this kind of infection diseases. So so when you see the agriculture, beginning of the agriculture, this is like early Holocene, middle Holocene. So these are the early Holocene when actually from 2000 to 12,000 BC to BP to 8,200 BP. So you are finding these kind of this crescent where the agriculture was begin, and from there it spread throughout. There are different areas, as you can see, from where the domestication of plants as well as the animals. All it started around 12,000 BCE BP. So these are the things led to the domestication of animals as well. So animals also played, the plant and animal both played very important role when we talk about the infection. So you can see around again that around 5,000 years back, you are having the domestication of animals like camel, and before that you are having humped cow around 8,000 BP. So you are having the bovid or cattle coming into picture as a domesticated animal, or before that you are having pigs, and before that we are having the dogs. So this is important to understand because the when we started the domestication of plants and the animals, we started settling down at one particular place. So the it changed the complete interaction between human and animals. So it was just 6 million years ago, it was just a wildlife, and it changed around around 200,000 years back as a companions, as a dog. Then livestock is around 12,000 BC, which coincides with agriculture, with beginning of agriculture. So you are having cattle, chickens, pigs, dogs, and later on you are having the rats. So all those things, how it is relevant to our topic today, because lot of diseases which comes to human or human population, they come from the animals. So as you can see, COVID-19, it is they are saying that it is coming from the bats. So here you can see a lot of the diseases like plague, Yersinia pestis, of which comes from the rats and their fleas. So we get some kind of a plague victims of plague evidences, or rabies, or like bovine tuberculosis, which comes from the cattle, which can be through unpasteurized milk, or with direct consumption of meat, uncooked meat. And there are like yellow fever or malaria, like mosquitoes. Mosquitoes is a big menace in tropical countries. So these are the things which have, these are animals which actually affected the human health, or it contributed to infection diseases to humans. So all this is very much coinciding with the around with the population explosion also. If you see in this particular graph, you can see around 8,000 years the population started increasing, and later with the industrialization and after the agriculture revolution, I can say, came to the irrigation and in this era and other places, you can see that steadily the population is exploding. So it is explode. So this is one major concern when we talk about the managing of infection disease, because if the population is exponential in number, then it is very difficult to control the epidemics, as we are staying with close to each other. So it's very easy to get infected easily. So this is what is all together, which is having what I told you about the history of pandemics. We can start with. So when we talk about archaeological population, the most of our data, or the majority of our data, comes from the skeletal collection from different excavations. So as you can see here, that different types of burial practices being observed by these past population. As you can see, four-leg jar in Inamgao or Ramapuram, the just young ones were buried in the twin urn, where it has been considered to be they are going back to their the womb. So these are different types of burials, like twin burial from Inamgao. Then you have multiple burials. This is very relevant to our topic, like why there is multiple individuals buried in one burial pit. Maybe it is related to some kind of epidemics or some kind of a infection, something like that. Some burials are seated, some are sleeping, some are in extended position, like you can see here. This is Harappan's population. We know Harappan population, like it is Indus civilization. We are knowing this since our school days. So there we can find lot of this kind of burials in different forms. So from here we get whatever information about the uh, any kind of diseases from that. So these are our primary database. Actually, whatever we get, these are our primary database. So it has a lot of problem also, because as you can see, there are many bones are lost in the excavation. There are many bones are not well preserved. There are a lot of problems with the preservation of the body parts. Sometimes taphonomical activity like water or rodents or any other things, they create problems while recovering the data. So these are the things limits our understanding about paleopathology as such. So other than the archaeological evidences, our like Rigvedas or our literary resources like Rigveda, Atharvaveda, or Charak Samhita or Shushruta Samhita. So these are like Rigveda is considered to be 2000 BCE. The general notion of having that date. So it is having the connection with the later Mesolithic or agropastoral communities. So we are having some references of jaundice, leprosy, tuberculosis, these kind of things. Atharvaveda talks little more in detail about leprosy, jaundice, cough, cold, pain, and other thing. So when we come to the around 600 BCE, which is somewhere around Megalithic, is these are like cultural terms you might be knowing, but so they also talk about leprosy, tuberculosis. I like Rajaksha or Kushta. These are the names we know. So Shushruta Samhita also, it talks about diabetes and jaundice, typhoid, like the type of fever. All those things are can be seen mentioned in this kind of literature. So Shushruta Samhita has emphasized more on cleanliness, hygiene, and earthquake, famines, and other physical phenomena have been described as a main cause for plague and cholera in the certain literature. So, what is exactly paleopathology? We'll be dealing more. I will be showing photos of what is paleopathology, but to just be here. So, paleopathology is essentially can be defined as a studies of ancient disease or ancient sufferings like pathological specimens. It is discipline that aims to trace the origin and how it is been history of disease. And the main objective of paleopathology research includes the diagnosis part, like of specific disease, why it is, like what is exactly the problem for that particular group. Then you have an analysis of the impact of various diseases in human populations through time and space. That is more important. Why particular pathology is present in particular cultural context. Clarification of evolutionary interaction between humans and disease. Like as we are seeing today, because of the COVID-19, we are behaving in a certain way which we are not behaving some before March. So we are keeping social distancing, we are keeping ourselves away from other people. So how the interaction between the pathologies and with the humans, how it is having the um, interaction. So and the accuracy in diagnosing diseases, archaeological population is main objective of the paleopathology. The scope is, as I was telling you, what is the lesion or anomaly is, what exactly it is about, then how the lesion is formed, what are the dynamics behind that, what are the etiological issues which we see in the this particular lesion, why the lesion is formed, conceptual framework, particular context of it, and potential area where the research, where the anthropologists can contribute a lot in understanding the paleopathology. So methods which are there like microscopy or microscopy, histology, scanning electron microscopy, X-rays, bone chemistry like trace elements, stable isotope, DNA sequencing. DNA sequencing not only about individuals but about the pathogens as well. So trying to identify, as I showed you in the second slide, like hepatitis B. So you are getting the uh, or the plague where you are getting the DNA of the pathogen itself. So it is like that DNA. But the problem with DNA, again, in Indian context, is the survival of it. We are not able to get the DNA survival of human, like the person who from where we are getting the bone. So it is much higher technology where we are trying to get some pathological DNA. So other resources like archaeological evidences, literature, as I was telling you about Sushruta Samhita or Rig Veda or anything, what kind of parallel evidences you are getting from different areas. So it is required to have an interdisciplinary approach. It cannot just require. It cannot survive only on just observing the pathology, but it needs to be put into different disciplines and trying to understand it. So even though we try to understand, there are a lot of limitations for the diagnosing of the skeletal anomalies. Study is only restricted largely to those whose bones are affected. Secondly, is bone produce very limited ways of reaction to disease, like uh, the porosity. When I say porosity, the porosity is a very common and normal way of show of bone to showing any kind of distress. So it is very difficult to identify why that porosity is there on that particular bone. So it is very few ways bone can react, and as well as it is like prolonged illness. It cannot be shown. It cannot show the immediate cause. It cannot show the immediate what you can say pathology. It has to have a longer prolonged survival of that particular disease. The individual should be sick enough for that much time that the bone gets affected, because bone is the last place where the pathology can reach. So initially it starts with the skin or muscles and tissues, and then later on, with the illness prolongs, then you are getting the indications on bone. So it is very difficult. The population studied are dead and may not be representative of the living group. So, for example, if I can tell you about very good example is Indus civilization. So when we talk about Indus civilization, we see that it is like thousands of years the people were living at one particular place. But when you get human skeletal remains, or say 200 skeletal or 300 skeletal remains, even though if we presume that the Harappans population or civilization were at one place, the people were living in 10,000s, 50,000s in number, even though then you are getting just a fragmented, a very few people can is preserved. So you are getting the fragmented society there, representation of the very small portion of the society. So you are not getting entire population there, but you are getting some part. So it is a very problematic when we have to talk or discuss about the population level. We can talk about individual level, or we can talk about many other regions, but we cannot talk with full confidence about the entire population. So that needs to be understood when we try to interpret this kind of pathologies. So for the categories, for our understanding benefit, or for our study purposes, we divide the pathologies into congenital or infection, trauma, joint, metabolic disease, stress factors, neoplastic or dental disease. But for our purpose, like about infection, we will be just doing about infection disease and metabolic disorders. Only two diseases we'll be concentrating more on, because this tells you about the infection. So infection disease are basically found very common in archaeological population, but it is very difficult to distinguish from one infection order to another. So there are main two types of infection what we see. We can identify, one is non-specific infection, where it is very difficult to diagnose the etiology. We know that the bone is sick, or it is has a pathology, but we are not able to understand the etiology of it. And one is called as a specific infection, where the cause of infection is possible to diagnose. Like for example, leprosy, tuberculosis, trichomonas infection. These are the infections where we know that they are there because of the pattern on the bones. So when we talk about infection disease, this is just to give you just idea about virus versus bacteria. So two different differences between two common pathogens, like how we can say the COVID is 90, COVID-19 is a virus, not a bacterial infection. So viruses are very small in comparison to bacteria. The viruses only grow and reproduce inside the host cell. So bacteria doesn't require that. So systematic disease caused by viral infection include influenza, measles, polio, AIDS, and COVID-19. But bacterial disease includes pneumonia, tuberculosis, or food poisoning. These kind of is related to the bacterial infection. So this is how different infection disease which caused epidemics in past, and they are causing sometime in in today's also, like malaria is still an epidemic in certain places in the world. So malaria, leprosy, tuberculosis, plague, cholera, these are related to the infection related to the bacteria. But infection related to viruses are influenza, hepatitis B, yellow fever, smallpox. So these are the related to the viral category. So this is how we can identify which one was doing harm to the population or humans basically. So non-specific infection, what we see here, you can see here there is a swelling or periostosis, periostosis lesions on the femoral fragment. Here you can see on the femoral distal end here, the porosity. This is a very young, actually it's an infant bone, and you can see very active porous infection on the radius. It's a infant, around 1 month old child. So it is very difficult to identify what exactly happened to this particular child. Uh, but the infection is there. It's a very active infection. It's not recovered. So you can see that. But here we can see that this is a specific infection, or we can see it is a trichonormal infection, which can be trichonormal infection like syphilis, yaws. These are the pinta. These are comes under the trichonormal infection. So we are having these kind of a trichonormal infection in archaeological population. So you can have the nodal lesions like this, yeah, disturbed this kind of holes. Then active periostosis here. This is from the Agripalli site, one crania, which was published in the physical anthropology, Journal of Physical Anthropology. It was a controversial because we are not knowing, but these are the kind of lesions the author described, which can be related to the trichonormal infection. This is very classical case of trichonormal infection from India, and this is a Caries sicca lesions here. You can see this is an occipital bone. Many of people may not, many of you know it is occipital bone, but just people who don't know, it is on the back side of our skull. So it is occipital bone. Then you have this entire facial structure is damaged because of the scalite lesions, and these are the perforation related to the trichonormal infection. Then the single cavitation, or you are having cavity within the femoral bone, you are having thickness of the cortical bone here. So all those things are considered to be a trichonormal infection. This is a male person. So this was a CT scan. As you can see, this kind of destruction, it is not from the same individual obviously, but this is from the archaeological population. So in CT scan we can see it very clearly, like these kind of lesions, such a devastating to the crania, or devastating is but these kind of facial features can be related to. So it is very ugly looking, uh, very scary looking, not exactly ugly, scary looking face of the disease, the infection person. So these are the things we need to consider, how people. So this is the X-ray of that another person, where you can see the thinning of the wall of long bones. You are having this kind of very blurry lines here. So these are again an indication of a trichonormal infection, like how the bone, how severity of the bone destruction for the trichonormal disease. This is called as a infantile or congenial syphilis. As you can see in archaeological population, if we get these kind of teeth, it is definitely is a syphilis which is congenital, like from the mother to child it has come. So you can see very distinctive enamel changes on the teeth. So it is called as a mulberry tooth or Hutchinson teeth. This is like there are three uh, dental defects can describe for that. It's Hutchinson incisor, Moon's molar or bird molars, or the mulberry molars. These are the things which, where if we get in archaeological population, definitely it shows about the syphilis. So if it is going from mother to child, which means it had a wider effect on the population. So this is how you can identify. When we talk about the metabolic disorders, so this is comes under the infection disease. When it comes to metabolic, so metabolic disorder is when the like proper normal way of growing of tooth or any bone, if it get um, stopped or it gets remolded. So you can have the like vitamin D deficiency or vitamin C deficiency, like that. So the normal growth, cell growth stops, and once the body recovers from that any prolonged infection or malnourishment, so again it starts. So these kind of diseases which comes under the metabolic disorder or metabolic diseases. It can tell you about the um, the infection, what was prominently seen on the Indian, like how it had changed in the younger age, when because it happens when the child is still growing. So it is happens in the early age issues, health issues. This can tell you about. So this is very interesting example is localized enamel hyperplasia. This is a canine, deciduous canine, which is completely formed, which are generally formed by 9 months. So here the lesion is, you can see it is it is circular in pattern. It is known as a localized enamel hyperplasia. So if you see the distance, you can see maybe the child was sick. Maybe if we consider that this takes 9 months to develop, so maybe around six, it starts from here, the growth starts from the tip and it ends till the crown is completed. So if we consider that, so this is maybe we can take it as a 5.5 or 4.5 months. Here the half crown must have been formed. So if you see the child was sick maybe around 5 months till 6 7 months, so more 1 2 months the child was completely sick, and that's why it created this kind of a depression. This is called as a linear enamel hypoplasia. Again, you can see the growth starts from here, it ends here, so you can actually visualize the child was sick for particular time during the growth. So the Harris lines and of the subadult, so this canine and this femur, they are belongs to the one individual. So you can see here growth disturbance line, Harris line, or growth disturbance or recovery lines, because the bone has recovered from here and it has grown. But eventually, because of the it recovered, but again maybe the child must have suffered from some another health issues and succumbed to death. But it says that this is a time when the child is mainly dependent on mother, so for the breastfeeding. So which means the child was not able to get proper nutrition through mother. So maybe because of that, it's reflected in the growth pattern, as well as it's not exactly the infection, maybe the malnourishment. So all those things plays a lot of role when the child is growing. So this is a very good example for understanding the early age issues. Can tell you about more about, indirectly tell you about infections and during that time. This is a vitamin C deficiency from, as you can see, this is a mandible. Same, there are two halves of mandible. So the child was not even 4 months, 3 months old. So at 4 months, so you can see the active porosity on the mandibular fragment. So this is an indication of a vitamin C deficiency. So it can be shown, it can be understood from the point of view that the child was not properly fed or properly was not developed, or the mother was also not well. So it can indirectly tell you about the mother's health as well. So when we compare these kind of pathologies, like this is the from Nevasa, this particular burial is. So you can see the it is completely nicely exposed spots where the child is being buried. So when we come see the age category and the overall death percentage, as you see that the around 56.96, 57% of the population, the children or the infants, like was coming under the age of 0 to 1 year. So many of them were not able to cross the 1 year of their life. So the infant mortality rate, if you see, it's much higher in the early agropastoral communities, which is around 2000 BCE. So children were more. They are very easy indicators of the. Unfortunately, infant mortality rate or the child mortality rate is very good indicator to understand the pathological stress on the population, because the immune system is not properly developed. So they are more exposed to these kind of health issues. So this way you can identify the population history about infection diseases. This is very interesting. This is iron deficiency. This was earlier considered to be the iron deficiency anemia, like porotic hyperostosis, and here it is called as a cribra orbitalia. Basically, it is the porosity above the orbits. So on the orbital roof, here you can see the active cribra orbitalia. So this was considered to be a iron deficiency anemia related. But now later on, this is considered to be a manifestation of malaria. So the spinal porosity, like in the uh, vertebral column and sacrum, then the humeral cribra or femoral cribra, you can see here. These are considered to be indications of malaria. And porotic hyperostosis and cribra orbitalia is considered to be indirect indications of malaria infection. So it is possible whenever there is a malaria, these kind of defenses mechanism is created by our human body, like thalassemia or sickle cell disease. So mainly to like if it has a symbiotic relationship. So if the malaria exists, so also these two. So these are the different indications on the skeleton where they can identify where the sickle cell anemia is there and thalassemia is there. So, what are the cranial lesions? What are the postcranial lesions? And these are the been kind of put forward as a evidence of malaria, because we don't have a direct evidence of malaria infection in archaeological population. So, but we have these kind of bone changes seen in the like enlarged nutrient foramina, thin corticals, or widening medullary cavity, enlarged malocclusal dental retardation or mandibular infection, osteoporosis. These are the conditions where we can identify this particular individual was probably going through sickle cell disease or thalassemia, like in Indian context, if we say the eastern part is mainly the all over the India. When you have the malaria infected regions, it comes under the infected region. So your body or genetic makeup changes into, and it creates a sickle cell anemia or sickle cell in the to fight against the malarial infection. So this is how we can identify these kind of epidemics in the archaeological population. We did this particular paper. This is from this collection is from Anthropological Survey of India, Harappan population, and we studied this particular population. So we identified tuberculosis in the in this context. So we are having this kind of abscesses and related bone deformation in the vertebral column. then the porosity on the fibula, and these are the indications of the tuberculosis, uh, active tuberculosis in the individual. So, not on the vertebral column, but if you see the vascular side of the ribs, also you can have multiple bone lesions like nodular form or disturb of porosity or woven bone or laminar bone. These are the indication which tells you about the individual suffering from tuberculosis. So this is from the mummy, Egyptian mummy, where they could identify um, the spinal tuberculosis, and this is the one skeleton where the spinal tuberculosis was. So this is how exactly how it looks in the uh, living person. So these kind of active lytic lesions are very important to look into archaeological population to understand the tuberculosis. Then leprosy, this was the first time we could identify leprosy in the archaeological context from Balatal, one site called Balatal. So you have the bilateral erosive lesions on the supraorbital margin. Then you have the nasal septum is nasal spine. It is kind of worn out. Then you are having this maxillary, the anterior portion is gone, completely remolded, and which has a associated antemortem tooth loss. Then your mandible, you can see it's barely keeping the teeth in the jaw, but alveolar resorption, the bone has reduced its length. So these are the indications. Then you are having the spinal indications. Then this is a carpal bone here, carpal bone, and you are having periostosis lesions. So these are the indications. So basically, where there is a the extremities like nasal hands or legs or any even the chin, all those things where the extremities it starts deteriorating and it starts getting altered. And this is a very good example for having the leprosy. So in bones, if we get these kind of, in skeletons, if we get these kind of lesions, we are sure that it is related to the leprosy. So this was we found. So these are the leprosy was again a part of epidemic. So coming to the DNA. So around 7,000 years, this is the paper which was published in 2018, and it is from Max Muller Institute. So you can see here in that if you want to go ahead and check this paper, the paper is very much available in the uh, web. So they could identify the lesions of hepatitis B in the skeletal population. So they could identify around in the 7,000 years. So these kind of ancient viruses appear to represent a distinct lineage that is no close. So how it is very useful for us, because how we are changing our relationship to the different viruses and different bacteria or different pathogens. The pathogens themselves are changing into different ways to act on us. So it is like very very strange ways, like uh, we are we as well as them, like the viruses or the bacteria or pathogens versus against, we are against having the fighting with each other, like who is the most superior. So we are also changing as well as they are also changing. So this way we are able to identify in the 7,000-year-old skull where the early farmers were going through the hepatitis B infection. So this is, and it was found and it was published. Same with the, when you see the plague. So this was found in the Yersinia pestis, where they are found in the 5,000. So the plague, again the plague which comes through the rats to fleas to humans. So the most they could identify, this was paper published in 2015, they could identify the pestis, Y pestis DNA, and could identify, said that this is this particular plague was very much present in the early agro-pastoral communities um, in the population, human population. So these are the evidences which can tell you the skeletal evidence or the genetic evidence or the literature evidence. This all tells you the story about different epidemics or different kind of infection which had a very every potential to become pandemic or epidemics. They were very much present since long time. So just to this is just slightly diverted, but I would like to, this is also interesting, the quarantine. When we say that it's been quarantine, the history of quarantine, whenever there is an infection or epidemics or something, everybody is trying to put the people aside who came. So this particular word called quarantine, which came from Italy, which means 40 days. So in fact it was said that the when during 1340s Black Death, so the people who were coming through these ships, they were quarantined or they were kept aside for, so as it could say that 37 days to die from the plague. Only lucky living would leave. So rest they would die. So this quarantine word has come from this particular event about Black Death. So the history of quarantine, like leprosy, as you can see here, leprosy hospital, the people were tied here and they were fed, but they were kept aside. And this is very interesting from archaeological point of view, because when we see the leprosy, history of leprosy, we do not get leprosy uh, uh, patients or leprosy in the lepers. We should not say it leper, but the people who are suffering from leprosy, we do not get any evidences because they were kept aside from rest of the population. And they might have died. They must have been hurriedly, kind of thrown away or buried or and burn. So because of its, the people got scared of that infection. They got scared because they thought that it will come to us. The population will get exposed to these kind of deadly viruses or bacteria. So they tried to hurriedly kind of keep those people away from the people, so different people. So this is how we can identify like these kind of leprosy or cholera hospital or plague quarantine center. So these are the different ways people try to avoid the infection disease to come into the population level, come so these are very interesting areas to look into. So how we can interpret this into archaeological population, because I'm talking from archaeological point of view. So when you see the archaeological population, what we don't get the entire settlement, but we get the entire house or entire thing. We get the patches where people were living, like the house plan, or how the how people, the cluster, house cluster, or houses, cluster of houses, and how people were living with each other, or how people are interacting with the environment, how they are, whether they were having a proper sanitation, whether they were having particular way of disposal of all dirty things and other things. So these are the ways. So in archaeological population, we get these kind of uh, town planning or this kind of houses plannings and other things. So as you can see here, there are different people are living in a crowded places there, because it's a village and people are living in a very close proximity with each other. So this is the way when you see in the today's context also. These are the photos I have taken from one night. So as you can see, people are, the houses are very close to each other, and they are doing most of their activity outside, cleaning utensils or cleaning clothes or staying and other thing, as well as they are having a close contact with animals, and the young children are also moving around with and then here you are having uh, the muddy roads, and from which lot of things, lot of infection can come inside your houses and other things. So this is the ideal situation where the infection can spread very easily. So a lot of infections are, so these are the areas where the rats, dogs, pigs, and are different animals, they can interact with human beings as well. So mosquitoes, if you have agriculture activity, so you are having mosquitoes, you are having a lot of activity related to water, and from sheeps and goats, these pastoral communities, they are virtually living with the animals. So through that, lot of infections are coming in the you coming into humans. Then these kind of staying for a long time in water and muddy water can reflect, can can infect us as well. uh, this is during the rainy season, the situation is like that. But during the drought, what happens? So during the drought, there is no water. Most of the, as you know, that most of the India comes under a drought hit area. Like if I talk about Maharashtra, Maharashtra comes under the drought hit area all the time. So as you can see, if there is a scarcity of water, the woman has to travel kilometers to get the water into their homes, and the water scarcity is so much that uh, they they have to take whatever is available. So these kind of water resources like muddy water, or water infected with different viruses or something, so they have to drink because there is no other way to survive. There is no other way to live other than that. So when you have a drought, when we talk about industrialization, when you these kind of drought hit areas, or when there is an infection, when there is people are infected or having diseases, people move out of that area. They move to different places. They try to go out of their livings and try to identify, try to get some other resources to fulfill their basic needs. So when we think about the smaller settlements, when you think about bigger settlements disintegrating into the smaller settlements, the infection is one of the reason why you can have these kind of, so like when there was a plague epidemic, people moved, they ran from the big cities and went inside the smaller villages. So it shows that the people move during these kind of calamities, and there is no other way. So they indirectly try to do social distancing from each other. So all those things are very much required to understand the epidemics, the dynamics of epidemics, basically. So when we see this entire, if I think so, you liked it, but when you see this in the population growth and technology, and how it changes into three different levels, like a landscape or natural or population level. So you change the when you come to the population growth and agriculture, you actually modify the entire natural system there. You try to cut all the trees for the agriculture activity. You try to cut uh, uh, there is no much balance between the natural ecosystem and the uh, human ecosystem. So when we talk about landscape level, you have this increasing city, peri-urban settlements, population size is increasing. Then you are having the forest habitat alteration. So you cut, as I was telling, then decline in natural pathogens regulation capacity, human settlement, encroachment. So through the wildlife also we get a lot of diseases. So we directly get connected with those wild animals, and from that we are having a lot of epidemics coming into the human population. So in the water diversion, or concentration or mixing of wild domestic species, so agrochemical occurrence, all those things, this changes the entire landscape there. So with human coming into picture, the we try to improve improve according to our own need. So we try to have, so what happens is in natural community level, so you have the domestication, transport, and human encroachment, and the human natural environment continuum is get disturbed because of whatever we do here. So all those things comes to the population level, so where you are having emergence process of the host parasite biology, which is shifting the host novelty, then transmission or amplification and the genetic exchange between the uh, pathogens also change humans capacity to handle the pathology changes. So all those things results into the disease emergence. So entire this thing, so we don't have can't see the epidemic as an epidemic, but we need to understand why that epidemic has came into the existence. And what are the causes behind the infection? What are the causes behind the epidemics and other things? So this needs to be understood when we are trying to understand the when we try to understand the dynamics. So, and thank you to Abhishekta again and the webinar for giving me opportunity to discuss my topic. And if you have any questions, please.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was more than interesting to me, and I was totally engrossed listening to each and every slide of yours. And I would like to mention before we start with the discussions, the thing apparently looks very easy. Whenever we get a bone, we can see this and that, but actually, it is a very tedious job. You need to go to excavation, then you need to identify the bone, because we don't get the bone in a total long piece. We get a fragment, and a very small fragment even. Then you need to identify the bone. Then you need to identify the sex of the bone, the side of this side identification of the bone. Then you need to go for the identification of the particular disease, which is a very long and a very tedious process. And I have seen the total process being done in front of my eyes, so I know how tedious it is. And thank you so much, ma'am, because it's a very kind of a issue which I think many of the students wants to learn, but we get very few chance to learn from the experts. And I think many of the students who are participants here will be interested to take up such issues in their upcoming researches. So we will be having a very good discussion session. But before continuing with that, I know we have with us Walimbe sir, Professor Walimbe. So I will request, sir, please can you just uh, put your video on and share with us some inputs about the lecture and something else, whatever you want to say. Please, sir. So are you here?
I don't know where he's there or not.
Yes, I can see his name.
Okay, I don't know how to. Hello, sir.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, sir.
I don't know.
Yes, sir. We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Mm.
Ma'am, can you just put this sharing off? It's still showing.
Okay, yeah. I will.
Huh.
I don't know how to go to their sharing. The window has become smaller.
No,
So I don't know.
on the top of that sharing panel, you get a option stop sharing.
Hmm. 1 minute.
Mhm.
It's become the it's problematic actually. Just mm,
Yeah.
stop sharing. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So please, sir, can you just put on your video, sir, so that everybody can see you?
I don't know how to do it.
So on this, are you using? I can see you're using your mobile phone.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. On this, on the bill, on
Maybe
Windows.
maybe I can just talk.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. No issues.
Yeah. Now this lecture is very nice. I really congratulate Veena for well giving such a nice information, and I'm sure it will be very useful for other students and well archaeological community in general. The main comment I want to make here is uh, say there are two or three, maybe three types of sources of information we have. We have information from bone, for which our branch, our laboratory is specialized in. So we read the bones and get some information. but we have to corroborate our data with the archaeological finds. And for that, we need some assurance from archaeologists to go into their core evidence so that we can have correct biocultural perspective of the situation. So only, the inferences based only on bones will not be really sufficient. We have to use our data in relation with the archaeological finds, and probably with other finds may not be possible at this age, but maybe we have to corroborate our evidences with more scientific technology like DNA or like DNA. Well, so far as this lecture is concerned, I'm not really sure. Maybe if there is no other question, maybe Veena can spend some time to talk about the metabolic diseases more. Well, I really not sure whether the evidences of Harris lines or enamel hypoplasia. How are we going to talk about pandemics using these evidences? I'm not really sure about it. Well, vitamin C lowers your infection, lowers your immunity. But how? Well, that is indirect evidence to talk about pandemics. But specifically the Harris line evidence or enamel hypoplasia evidence, they talk about more about the individuals, not about the society, not about the community. Okay, I think that's enough. Let Bina respond to that.
Okay, sir. No, actually, I was talking about that in relationship to indirect evidences, not the direct evidences of epidemics. Means, if we consider these kind of evidences like metabolic disorders as indications of malnourishment or infections or the relationship between these two. So, and as we can see that in the Deccan chalcolithic population, when we are seeing that around 0 to 1 year old children, like around 57% of children are dying because of probably because of malnourishment or infection disease, then there must be some kind of evidences or some kind of indications which tells us the story about the population going through some kind of a stress, nutritional stress or infection stress. So I was talking about in that connection that it's an indirect evidence of not exactly epidemics, but some kind of a health issues seen in these populations.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else has any kind of query or confusion? You can just put your microphone on and have a direct conversation with madam. I can see in the comment box, ma'am, everybody is kind of mesmerized with your presentation, and they have loved it. And I think they have learned a lot, so that so they have not generated any kind of questions as of now.
I think so. I think so. There is no questions. Either they didn't like it at all, or they
No. They
they
must
liked
have
it.
liked it. I can see many seniors are also there. Somebody can come up and have any kind of discussion, or anybody wants to speak.
Yes, one question came, Abhishekta. Could you please read out this? One question came.
Okay, ma'am, this is a question from Deboshri Dash, and she is
Okay.
our junior research fellow with Calcutta University.
Okay.
She writes, lesions in skeletal parts may indicate some infectious diseases, but what type of
Right.
lesions or the porous that are found in the bones indicate a particular disease? I think she wants to ask, from kind of lesions, how we can identify the particular disease. What is the relationship with the lesion type and the disease type?
Okay. So the porosity which is there, that is a very normal way of showing, as I was telling you, that it is a normal indication that the bone is or the individual is suffering from certain kind of diseases. But you can't just see it on the one bone and try to identify the particular disease. So you have to see the pattern which is seen on the entire skeleton. So like, for example, leprosy. So leprosy is, as I told you, like all the extremities or all the ends, body ends actually, which gets affected. So any bone changes or any bone modification on those extremities can can indicate that the person was suffering from leprosy. Or you can see about trichomonomal infection. So there are 4 types of trichomonomal infection: syphilis, vernal syphilis, then you have pinta, jaws. So they have different distribution of porosity at different regions. So the syphilis, mainly the venereal syphilis, has the indication on your face, the frontal bone or the zygomatic or the facial structure mainly get damaged because of the, or the cranial structure get damaged because of that. But there are certain, they are having the long porosity on the long bones or the on the tibia, not even on the femur, on the tibia or the lower legs. So these, the pattern of porosity at, can tell you about the disease. It's not, porosity is porosity, it just, that is the way it has been shown. But how it is being distributed is more important when you're trying to understand the particular disease. I think so. That is okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am,
Yeah.
another question. What are the
Yes, sir is telling something.
Okay,
Sir
okay.
is telling something.
Yeah, in relation to this question, one thing I want to add here is to diagnose a lesion, it is probably our trade secret. But one thing I can tell you, that the only reaction that bone can give to a disease, a problem, it can be a nutritional insult or it can be a pathological insult, is either by distracting the tissue or formation of new tissue. So there are 2 types of reactions are possible. One is osteoblast and one is osteoclast. So we have to read the bone, feel the bone, and we should be able to identify what is normal and what is not normal. So once you get that training, once you develop your eye to understand what is not normal, then the things become easier. Then we have to go for the specific parts of the body. You know what kind of lesions may alter pattern, well, growth pattern or well, bone pattern, uh, because reaction to a problem will not be similar to, well, throughout the body. Specific bones will get affected because of certain things. So we have to identify the problem on the basis of the formation of new tissue on the bone. The way the new tissue is being formed, the excess pattern, the porosity is actually the pores that you see on bone. They are the, well, natural means to, well, take out the dead tissue. Like pus, you don't understand. I think everybody understand what is pus. Pus is dead tissue, bone dead tissue. So any hole, any foramen that you see on any, well, pathological bone, infected bone, that is the to drain out the dead tissue. So the how, whether the problem that you see on bone, whether it is paleopathological or pseudopathological, you have to train yourself to understand this difference also. So any change that you see on bone may not be pathological, it can be pseudopathological. Pseudopathological, what I mean is, it can be taphonomical in origin. So once you develop your eye to see what is normal and what is not normal, then the things become easier. So thank you, Veena.
Yeah, thank you. There is one question. There
Yeah.
is one question which is coming from Ananya Ghosh.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, what are the paleopathological indicators that exist that the tabular accuracy? We can actually find in histological analysis. We can find this kind of different changes in bone related to pathology very much, but it requires a very sophisticated matter. We generally use sophisticated technique where we can't access all the time. So it is very much possible, but we don't do it as it's very expensive or very it's not easily available. Not expensive. It's not very. And there is one question is Ramendra Singh. He's
No,
telling
ma'am.
that did India's
That this question is
yeah.
from Ananya. The previous question was from Ritik Banerjee, and
Okay.
the name is just
Okay.
above that.
Okay. 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 So I think so. I answered that, and then did India suffered more from the disease than other parts of the world? It's very difficult to say, like whether they have suffered, because as we see epidemics or in like the in archaeological, as I told you, like there are a lot of limitation for the archaeological population. So it's very difficult to identify that one particular, but as I was telling you again, like the malaria or malaria especially, this is like Africa and South Asia, they are more exposed to the malarial infection, so probably that was more in number of that, but we cannot just say that it was only suffered from India was suffered mainly because of one particular disease, so it's very difficult to say.
Okay, ma'am. I have some personal requests from.
Yes.
First is from Dr. Tanushree Shao. She is assistant professor
Hmm.
with Bongovashi College. She wants to ask some question to you. Tanushree, you can
Right.
come. You can put your microphone on and ask the question directly. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Before she joins, I have another request. Not request. She's our co-organizer, Dr. Banita Behra.
Okay.
She has one
Okay.
question. Banita, you can ask ma'am directly.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Abhishekta. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for such an enlightening, talk, speech, and your presentation was absolutely very, very, very wonderful and attractive. I must say that many more young scholars are going to be attracted towards this field, ma'am. So let
Okay,
me
that's good.
let me inform you. Many more times I just got this opportunity to go to Pune, but I couldn't attend that program while I was in Bhopal. I about to meet you, but I couldn't because I'm working in museums. So,
Okay.
so
Okay.
this is the platform we are meeting first time. So just I
Yes.
want to ask you, ma'am, since I'm working in museums, so many more museums are having the collections, like Indian Museum is having the mummy collection. So is there
Yes.
any citations for the techniques to recover pathogens from these mummies? I'm not expert in this field, but as a curator, I just want to know.
No, in mummies it is very because you get tissue as well.
Okay.
So your data is not only based on the skeleton, but it is skeleton means bones, but it is again dependent on the tissues. So tissue gives you much more wider perspective regarding the pathogen. So definitely there are a lot of studies are being done on the mummies. So where you can extract the DNA, like as I told you, the plague or tuberculosis. I showed you that particular picture where the the mummified body, where they could identify the tuberculosis. So same thing can be done. So you can do a lot of things from the mummies where the tissue is preserved. So definitely, but the thing is again, the access should be available. The proper person who is working on the tissues, mainly the tissues, because as I work on bones, I will be not able to identify anything related to tissues or muscles or any problem related to. But if somebody is working on that particular line, can really have a very great what you can say exposure to whatever was there in the that mummy. So very much possible, very much. Kolkata has that.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Very-
we have another question from Shromona Dhara. She's asking that we had a few evidences on pathological conditions of Neanderthals. They also probably tried some kind of surgery in cranium. Is there any
May
evidence?
I add
But
one?
I don't think Neanderthal has any evidence on cranium surgery. It is Burzaham, I think, ma'am.
No, no, no,
Burzaham
no. I don't think so. I have never heard about Neanderthal having surgery in the anything. Actually, sir wanted to Abhishekta, sir
Yes,
wanted
yes,
to
yes,
add
sir.
something.
Sure, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Walimbe sir, I don't know.
Yeah, in relation to that question which was asked by someone earlier, one thing I should tell you that the methodology that you apply should be, and it should be non-destructive in nature, because they are science that we know today and the science we may know after 20 years. So the things will evolve. So we should not disturb the specimen. At least minimum damage should be done to the specimen. So if you are working, experimenting on mummies, you should be very, 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 very careful. So there is no option. It is not the place where you can experiment something. You should be very sure about your technology, your approach, and then only you disturb the specimen. Otherwise, it will be wise to keep the specimens for the future generations.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
There is
Okay,
one
sir.
question.
Thank you so much.
Are
Thank
there
you.
any archaeological evidences of continuation of deadly disease all over the world, just like today? Black Death is a very good example, or the plague. It's continuously coming in cycles, and they are killed. The plague killed more people. Like 1/3 of the European population was killed in during the plague. So definitely there are a lot of epidemics which happened in the world. I think so. That was the answer. That was the question related, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Another question is from Raj Pandit. How we achieve or validate some of the archaeological hypotheses that may be in relation to major factors affecting bone disease? I think anything related to the bone disease gets reflected in the paleopathology. So anything related to
Yes.
bone we can analyze with paleopathology and vice versa.
Yes, that's true, Abhishekta.
And yeah, Tanushri, are you here? Hello. No. Another question we missed. It's a huge question. Uh, Ramandra Singh. He says, "Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much for such a wonderful, informative lecture. My question is quite apparently, we have evidences of various diseases left on the bones, but do we have any evidence of people recovering from the same? Just in order to understand the medical practices of those."
Definitely, we are having a lot of, like, as I was telling you, not everybody died because of the infection. Many people lived, like younger stage when you are having infection or any problem. If you're getting the adult skeleton with having some problem, health issues during the childhood, which shows that it has achieved adulthood because it recovered from the particular pathology or disease. So definitely it's there. It's not that it's, but it is very difficult to say whether that person died because of that infection, if the infection is active, if it is completely recovered. So that also can be identified, as sir told you about osteoblast or osteoclast. So if you know that kind of mechanism, and if you can say, when I use a lot of times like active porosity or active lesions, and when I say active, there are active lesions means they're still going on. The person is dead, but the infection is still going on. When I say recovered porosity, or the people were recovered, which means the that porosity remained, because that is the evidence, but it got what you can say, it got survived. The person survived through that lesion. So definitely, not everybody died. Many people recovered from that. Like as in context of COVID-19, many people are positive, but they are recovering also. So definitely, it's there. It's very much
Yeah.
See,
And
there was no antibiotics.
there.
Hello?
yes, sir.
Yeah, there was no antibiotic as such before the beginning of 20th century. Only we got antibiotics. Before that, there was no antibiotics. So keeping the person alive for few years, that itself was a science contribution to the society. Whether the person was fully 100% economically beneficial, he was doing his full-time job. That is, we don't know about it. But keeping the person alive, that itself was a contribution. And this is how we evolve, no? To have the science developed now. Before few months, no one in this world knew about coronavirus. This word itself was not known. But everybody now, we have entire world is now literate about the what causes corona. So this is how we evolve. So you should have some problem to find out a solution for the problem. So this is the contribution of paleopathology. We know about the, well, this is the contribution of the population which died few years, few thousand years earlier. This is how our medical science evolved. And the science which, this slide which Veena showed us, the, Veena,
Yes, sir.
you can hear me, no? This slide
Yes,
that
sir.
we showed about the different medical sciences being involved, like Shishruta Samhita and
Yes,
Panini's,
sir.
yeah. So this is the evolution of the medical science itself was on the way, and these proto-historic individuals who suffered from those problems, they gave proper impetus for the science, medical science to evolve. So we should take the science, we should take this pathology in that perspective. So they have contributed for our betterments.
Oh my God, we got some two more questions. One is from Priyoma Bhattacharya. She is a fellow with Anthropological Survey of India. Does the paleopathological understanding helps in the present day pathological conditions? If yes, how?
I think so that I covered a little bit, and sir also told about that. Like, yes, obviously, the pathologies which are there, like I told you about hepatitis B and plague, Yersinia pestis. So the genetic strain what those virus and bacteria had has now changed their genetic makeup in today's time. So obviously, the paleopathological analysis or the analysis, any DNA or any bone analysis can tell you how the trend was changed from earlier times to today's time. So obviously we can see those kind of trends, different trends in the different time zones, and which pathology was more prominent in which part and at what time. So that is also can be understood by paleopathology. So it's very relevant subject. uh, how, uh, how the humans are adapting in the history to different pathogens or infection, and how we can see those strategies in today's how it has been changed. Obviously, yes, definitely we can use this knowledge base for today's problem, definitely.
Ma'am, another question is from Aditi Munmun Sengupta. She says that can you throw some light on the paleo diet analysis? As Sir was saying, whether remains of medicine can be analyzed long term to associate the pathology of the disease by molecular screening.
Paleo diet, yes. Can you throw some light on paleo diet analysis? Yes, we do. So in dental disease, we get this starter accumulation, or this from that we can identify from the bone itself. We can see what kind of diet that person was having. Then through isotope analysis, we can identify what kind of food they were having, whether this is like C13 plants or C14 plants, and from through that how we can identify the climate of during that particular time, what kind of food they were eating, what kind of staple diet they were having, whether they were having fish or whether they were having meat or plants. These can be identified. And medicine, obviously, I think so in that context, the saying whether remains of medicine can be analyzed long term, analyze long term to associate the pathology of the disease by molecular screening. Definitely we can see, and palliative is very interesting. You might have heard about the Neanderthal Tatar. They could identify they were chewing some kind of a medicinal plant for their there is some health issues. So that way, I think so we could do that paleo diet. analysis through bones. And isotope, now the isotope has become a really major way look to the paleodite sequence. So it is very much important when we are seeing the past population, definitely. So it tells you about what kind of foods and they were eating.
Okay. Another question is, there may be some diseases that make some lesions on the bones, may coincide with other lesions too. I don't know how can we discriminate.
Means what exactly?
I think she wanted to say that a kind of a lesion may be responsible
Hmm.
for some many kinds of diseases. How to discriminate that
Yes.
whether a particular lesion is for a particular disease?
I think Sarah answered that
Uh,
question. You
yeah.
need to identify the pattern basically, and it is very difficult to. In paleopathology is such a field. It's very interesting. At the same time, it is frustrating or it is confusing because many diseases there are a lot of differential diagnosis being done. You have to come to the logical conclusion through that. It's not that we are very sure about that particular disease was prevalent or that particular disease was present in that individual, but you have to first see the pattern, and then you can kind of deduction, through deduction methods you can come to some right, not exactly right, some proper conclusion that this particular pathology was, the lesions was present in that individual. So there is no clear cut formula for that. You need to see the bones properly and write down the lesions properly. That is the only way where you can have the diagnosis.
Yeah. That is the thing. I think in all the paleopathological journals or the research articles we get, the discussion always continues with might be or maybe, because it's very difficult to be sure whether the particular kind of a lesion or any kind of mark is due to a certain disease, because we don't have anything. Might be due to some other causes as well, but the analysis takes us to a particular disease. We can just have an idea that it might be due to such kind of a related things, because
Yes.
we don't have any
Because
proper evidence for that. We can only
yeah,
view it.
sometimes you get evidence of multiple disease. It's not only one disease. In one particular individuals, you can get a number of diseases also, because once you are sick, there are very easy. It becomes very easy to different diseases to come invade you basically. So it is very much possible that the bone lesions, like for example, when you have osteoporosis, definitely there is every chance that you will have fractures because the bone get damaged, bone gets weakened, and then you will have the fractures. So definitely it's not sometimes it's not one disease, but there are multiple diseases playing kind of hide and seek with human health. So it's that you have to come to the deduction method. That is the only way.
Okay.
Yes, Abhishekta. I guess questions are over,
There,
I guess.
no one. I don't think it's a question. Okay, ma'am, what are your takes in the paleoarchaeological studies in Northeast India? Does regional
Hmm.
affinities and their cultural attribute relates with some specific disease with other parts of the country? Is there any relation or discrimination? I think he wants to ask.
Okay. So Northeast India, yes, I have studied some skeletons from Northeast India like Jotsama, then Leshmi, then other LRI and all those Northeast India. Then I have studied some bones from this Uttaranchal and this. So regional affinities or their cultural attributes, like for example. Not related to epidemics, but I have found that there is a lot of modification between the lower leg, like the tibia and fibula, and the tarsal bone or the foot. So these kind of particular lesions, what I feel, they are more related to the walking on the steep areas like hills and other things. So these probably, and there is a I'm not very sure, but tuberculosis can be identified in this particular region. Uh, uh, I'm not able to tell you right now because it's not, I have not completed that work, but there is every chance that there was in the during 1700 or so, so you have some indication of tuberculosis in that particular area. So, you can identify the regional divisions or diversities of pathologies, but as the archaeological population is very less, like the archaeological skeletal remains are so less and so it is very difficult to come to any kind of a conclusion that this particular disease was prevalent in this particular region. So you can say, okay, you are getting these particular diseases in this area, so probably it was there, but uh, it is not easier way to look. It's very controversial topic actually.
So I think uh,
One thing, if you have time, one more thing I want to add here.
sure, sir.
Do we have time?
Yes, sir. You can continue, sir.
The thing is, the science of paleopathology is relatively new. It's only 60 or 50-year-old science. So we are still developing. So there is, the main problem that we have in paleopathology is we don't have any skeletal database as such. And there is no standardization of protocol, standardized protocol for interpreting the lesion. So there was a question about if the same lesion, how many, different problems, pathological problems may react to bone may react to different pathological problems in similar way. The differential diagnosis, that point Veena raised. So we are still developing, trying to get over this problem. And the main thing that we are doing here now is there is something called History of Global Health Project. Veena is part of that project. So we are analyzing all skeletal data present in the entire world using standardized technology. And this project will help us standardize the methodological protocol, standardize the, it will help us to have proper database. What are the problems and how to interpret them? So this is a very important very important stages. I think maybe Veena can elaborate on that.
Regarding what, sir?
Elaborate on this History of Global Health Project. So this project is basically for creating database and to standardize the methodological problems.
They have worked on the Western world as well as in European. Now they are coming to South Asia and Asian countries, where we have to pull all the data. We have to create one complete database for the skeletal series from different regions and different places it has been stored. So we have to this is a very big project because India is such a vast country, as well as it has been the excavations was going on since pre-independence day, and many institutions are holding these skeletal remains, and it will be India-wide project where every institute who wants who will collaborate with us will be sharing their data, sharing with the standard forms and standard methodologies how to record these skeletal remains. And then this is very good for everyone, for us obviously because we study human bones, but for the institution themselves also, because they will get the entire database ready for them, and it will be digitized, so it will be easier to record them. It is easier. So after that, it will be easier from the paleopathological point of view also to understand the evolution of paleopathology, because it's not just the skeletal remains, but skeletal remains found at one particular site, any particular site with any particular cultural context. So obviously, if Mesolithic population had a different type of disease pattern, or as someone asked me, can we identify that? So if Mesolithic population at Gangetic region had particular type of pathology, and the Neolithic Chalcolithic population from Deccan region or southern part of the region had different kind of pathological patterning. So we will able to identify those, because right now we are just having few skeletal data here and there scattered around, and whatever we have studied, myself and Valim sir, we have studied whatever. So they're very limited data. It's very meager data if we consider the skeletal collection from India. So it is a really important for everyone to have this um, observations, ready observations, which can be useful to understand the history of paleopathology, history of it will be not only the paleopathology, population history, and how the interaction between the pathologies, how the interaction between the humans with environment, humans with different pathologies, humans with other population as well. So this is a really ideal project for that. So I think so it will, if everyone comes together, this will be a great project.
This is the this is the largest anthropological project ever undertaken in the world. More than 40 universities all across the world, they are participating in this project. And we are estimating something like 200,000 specimens, skeletal specimens, 2 lakh specimens we are to examine. And as Veena said, the European component is over, American component is over, and they are coming to Asian component now, which will be followed by African and then the Australia. Australia and Africa, maybe we will do it simultaneously.
That's great news for all of us, I think. I think everybody is done with their questions and they have generated a lot of queries in their mind. I think they are hesitant about asking it in this forum. And if anybody has any query or want to ask anything, don't hesitate to contact ma'am. She is always ready to answer to any of your queries
Yes.
and guide you in this course, I think. So before we end, I would like to ask the main director of this Origin Life. We are just hosting, me and Vanita, but the Pulokesh Purokai, ma'am, you must be knowing him. He
Yes.
Okay, so I will
Hello,
ask Dr. Pulokesh Purokai to thank everybody on behalf of Origin. And before we end, I would like to ask everybody of you to put on your video so that we can have a group photo. We can take a snapshot of the group photo of this webinar today. So over to you, Pulokesda.
thank you, Abhishekta Gosroy, ma'am. Madam, hello.
Yes. Hello.
Dear participant, now we have come to the concluding part of today's 6th lecture. First of all, I would like to convey my utmost gratitude to Dr. Veena Mursim ma'am for gracing today's lecture and today's lecture. Thank you, ma'am, for your fascinating and thought-provoking address. And one my request to you, if possible, can we organize this paleopathological hands-on training program after the pandemic? There can be lot of students can be benefited, learn this technique, and
I would love to be part of it. Actually, we were thinking about it since long time, but it is not happening. But if Anthropological Survey of India and you people, young people, are ready to organize, I will be very happy to be part of it.
And
thank you,
I
ma'am.
will be a very generous student, ma'am, of yours. I want to learn again.
You're most welcome, Abhishek.
Thank you. Definitely, we will organize one workshop on that, and you will be first person to give that training to all of our students, all over the India. Maybe all over the India, students are waiting for this paleopathological training program.
Definitely.
And I want to thank Professor Olvin sir for his expert view and discussion, and his knowledge about all this topic. We learn a lot from him also. And one great news, just he shared with us that is a great news for India. The Indian scientists work on this 2 lakh specimen. That is great news, and I wish to clap for all of you team. And I want to thanks all the participant and eminent scholar and professor and scientist for engaging yourself with origin life. Or maybe today from the all over India, Dehradun to Pondicherry, even in northeast in East Indian part, that is Assam, Manipur, and even Uttarakhand, and now in Punjab, Haryana, Himachal, Rajasthan also, and West Bengal. Lot of participants from the West Bengal. This is a great success webinar today. I thanks all the participants for engaging themselves with us, and I appreciate and thanks for the hard work and support of our organizer, Dr. Abhishekta Ghoshrai ma'am, Dr. Bonita Behera ma'am, and Team Origin Life, and also our own director, Ms. Dimnit Kaur ma'am, for successfully materializing the webinar today. And I also thanks the Cisco Webex platform for get together and sharing our knowledge. And this is a great platform to we can see ourselves and we can talk ourselves in a direct face to face. This is a great opportunity to us to express our exchange our all the knowledges. And I think all participants can get understanding the relationship between paleopathology and pandemic from your presentation. It is a great and presentation how we can correlate that the fossils and other pathological remains with the pandemic. Thank you all of you, and once again thanks a lot, man, and all the participants and our organizer. Now I wish to hand over this platform to Ghosrai ma'am. Madam, you can continue.
Yeah, and I think we will be listening from Wallinger sir soon, and a prolonged lecture from him. I think everybody will love to hear from him, because today we got kind of a trailer of his knowledge. We would like to learn a lot from him, and we will be arranging soon a lecture on his behalf, whenever he gets time and whenever his time permits us. We will be arranging it soon. And now, before ending the webinar, we would like to request all the participants, please turn on your video so that we can take a picture of the gathering. Please.
Please put on your video. All participants, please come live. All participants.
Oh, it's okay. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishekta. Really,
Yeah,
it was
yes.
great.
Yes, and I think we will be having this hands-on training. If we can, if Origin Life can organize one such hands-on training, then everybody will have to have this chance to know about. Today they learned about the theory. They will get to know when they touch these bones, this morphology. The feeling is a different kind of thing. Unless you feel the bone and you feel these lesions and whatever you have heard today, you won't be able to even imagine how things gets analyzed. So we will, if Pulatilda can organize one of such kind of workshop, we will be very facilitated, and the students will have kind of attraction towards this new upcoming subject, and they can take it up as their specialization even, because in India we have very few experts
Right.
choosing having this having research on this field. We have to come up, because I think India has a huge amount of data which is still unanalyzed. We still need
Yes.
a lot of hands to analyze all these samples, and then we can
We need
contribute.
people, Abhishekta. We need people who are trained.
then we can contribute to the database more, because our data is being analyzed and studied by other countries, and we are sitting on the heap and we are unable to contribute on this research part.
Yes.
So we will be
Very
doing
true.
that. All the participants here today should take this initiative and come up with it. We should all join together. And thank you so much, ma'am, on behalf of Origin Life. And we will be having this archaeological series. We will like to hear from you more and more. We will continue with this such kind of webinars during our, even if we are close with this lockdown period, we will continue with these things. So thank you so
Definitely,
much.
Abhishekta. Thank you.
Thank you
Okay,
so
bye
much,
bye.
ma'am.
See
Bye,
you.
ma'am. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.